All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jewel Alderson-Clark with the San Diego County Office of Education. I also have with me Al. You want to introduce yourself?
Al Love, Senior Director, College and Career Readiness. Glad to be with you today.
And today we're going to talk about leading for career readiness with an equity mindset. This particular session was developed for the equity conference at SDCOE, so you'll see some of these logos along the way. The equity conference was rescheduled for this May. I don't think we'll be able to present as we have a conflict, but you might find some great sessions there, and feel free, you'll find the link to that in the footnotes of actually this first slide. And so feel free to access those slides, and I'll just keep dropping them in the chat for folks who join us along the way. We are recording today, so if you have a great time, we'll email this out to all attendees and those who registered, so you can reference or share it forward. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and get started. So when we start talking about career readiness and really having that mindset around equity, what we have to do is shift mindsets. And when we get into this, it's not just about CTE or career or college or one of those things, but the big question is, how are you increasing access to college and career for your least served students? So this is a mindset shift for some people, because we've really looked at raw numbers so often. And so as we dive into this, we hope that you see some of these things. So one way we do this and shift mindsets is to consider value. So the education our students have has value beyond the classroom. Our students should be able to impact their community. They should have authentic industry challenges. They should have access to college credit and certification, project-based learning, skill building, work-based learning, all these things that create really encouraging and engaging environments for our students. And although, and this lovely picture that's not a picture that's up here, apologies for that. But really thinking about making sure, what is the picture we think of in our head? We think of a picture of students sitting at desks in rows. It looks the same as it did 100 years ago. The workplace looks really different than it did 100 years ago. So we want to make sure that our educational systems reflect the workplace. Also thinking about who our learners are, our 21st century learners. We use this almost like as a future term, but we are over 20 years into the 21st century. So we want to make sure that we're engaging all of our students by being technology forward, integrate their learning so that it's, we're thinking about career and science and math and all those things together. That's my specialty. I used to teach medical chemistry when I was in the classroom, because I see the value of making learning have meaning beyond what's in the textbook and beyond what's in the standards to our students and to their future. We want it to be student-driven, not just student-centered. We've talked a lot about student-centered, but how do we step back and let students really, explore their strengths, interests, and values, know what they love, know what the world needs, and what they can get paid for and what they are good at. And this concept that you see here of ikigai, or purpose. Ikigai is this Japanese term meaning reason for being. So how are we letting our students drive this and know themselves enough to know where they want to go? We want to make sure that we are aligned to their strengths, interests, and values. And then also that our assessment is assigned to or aligned to industry needs, not just to standardized tests. So we want to really be thoughtful about our students and who they are as we go forward. And finally, the concept around equity-centric programs empowering students towards economic mobility. So I like to think about this concept that CTE, or career readiness initiatives, are an equity movement, because we know that a lot of inequities come from economic barriers, right? And so we want them to have this economic mobility and opportunities to move up in the economy. So you want to focus your program recruitment and think about special populations, keeping diversity, equity, and inclusion in focus. And we'll talk in a little bit about some of the data and where you can find where your CTE programs or your career programs aren't quite hitting that mark. We want to make sure our students have diverse models and opportunities, and they have support in pursuing that education. And we want to make sure that programs are designed to prepare students for high wage, high growth jobs. And so we'll get into that data as well. And finally, alignment to what's next. We in K-12 like to end it all and say, good job, we got them ready for college. But we know there are huge inequities in college entrance. And also there's tons of data showing that certain populations are more likely to drop out once they get to college. So does that mean they're really college ready when they leave us? So we have to really look in our system, and we want to think about how we empower our students into economic mobility by making sure that they are ready for that future.
All right.
Shoot this over to Al.
All right. Well, next slide.
Oh, sorry.
When we, and this is kind of where the rubber meets the road for me, right? The rubber meets the road here when we talk about, did students know about this course? Did they know about this pathway? Did they know about this occupation, profession, job, career? And did they know, or do they know, what kind of skills and knowledge is required? You always hear about the classic marine biologists and when folks talk about ocean or water related STEM careers, but most students that are not involved in AP Bio or something like that, they really don't know what the requirements are. And so when I think about what students should be able to know about when they're making informed decisions about middle school, and then informed decisions really about high school, and then really informed decisions about post-high school, it's about how are we as educators, as part of the system, making that digestible for students to know. It's just, I was at, I won't say the name of the college, at a college the other day, and I was surprised to hear from many of the individuals in this particular course. They were over 30, and they were sharing how they didn't know basic stuff that we assume that many students know coming out of high school. They didn't know about financial aid, they didn't know about FAFSA, I was shocked. And so what should we be able to make sure that all students, irregardless of their placement on the financial scales, their placement in what neighborhood they come from, how many languages they speak or don't speak, how can we make sure that they have the skills and knowledge and they have enough information to make an informed decision? I think it's educational malpractice when I look at high schools, and I'm looking specifically in San Diego County right now, and I see students who have graduated with a high school diploma and they have no post-secondary plan. They show up nowhere. They're not working, they're not at a community college, they're not at adult school getting a certification program, they're definitely not at a four-year school, they're not in the military. And when you talk to them, they say they're still trying to figure it out. And so I think that that's an area that we have to do a better job, and it starts at the sites level. And whatever system, whatever strategies you're using to move the needle in making sure your students have enough information to make an informed decision about what's next. Next slide. And so when we look at that, we take a look at the San Diego, we're using San Diego right now. And San Diego is building a talent pipeline. And if you click on this, and I think Jill's gonna click on it, it talks about projected new jobs, and this is going out to 2028. So if it's going out to 2028 and it's 2020, for the most part, 2023 right now, that's 5 years from now. And so when we look at where the jobs are in large number that would not allow for a high wage, a high skill, and they're definitely high demand, we see where those jobs are. I don't have to read those off to you. And so when we go backwards to our campuses and we go into our districts, we have to take a look at, are we offering opportunities for students to experience those particular sectors in our high school and our middle school programs. And if we're not, there's another unfortunate casualty that plays out when students are not aware, and we're living that in San Diego right now, when students are not aware of what the jobs look like in the 5 to 10 year down the road range, you end up having vacancies. You end up having a need for in-demand workers that has to come from somewhere else. And so we see this in San Diego, and we are passionate about creating more pathways in these sectors. So when we look at software developers and applications, we want entry-level software professional pathways. So what do you have to do? You have to talk to high school principals, and you have to talk about the fact that this is a pathway that has a high demand and a high growth. And what can we do to make sure that we're supporting you and offering these pathways on your campus in whatever sector, wherever you're from, whatever in your region is the in-demand sectors for the predictable future. You have to go backwards, obviously, to determine whether or not you are building a worker space when you look at your middle and high school programs. Next slide. Oh, I'll let you take this one, Jewel, when we look at just graduation and college readiness, utilizing the class 2016 class.
When we look at that list of jobs that we just saw before and all of those openings, these are all positions that often require at least a 2-year or 4-year degree. And so one of the things that we like to do is look back at some of the data and some of the disparities that we see in our own educational systems and how they may feed into some of the disparities we see in the workplace. So if we look at this slide, and these are all, this is the San Diego EDC, Economic Development Corporation, put out this report a few years back. So these are all San Diego county-wide data. And we know we have a very large Hispanic population, and yet these students are the least likely to graduate with the A through G completion rate at 36% for those students. And then we see the graduation rate also not really hitting the levels needed to even be able to take entry-level positions after they leave school without even their high school graduation. And we can take this back even further, and this data set, and if you click on, it's a fascinating report, it's very interactive, but it actually pulls data back down to our 7th graders. And what we can see here is that in San Diego County, we have 48% of our 7th graders are Hispanic, but only 15% of our degree holders are Hispanic. 62% of our degree holders being white, with 30% of our 7th graders being white. So we see a gap in the opportunities that these students will have. So unless we can change so that our 7th graders look to have the same percentages as our degree holders, knowing not everyone goes forward into a 4-year or 2-year degree. However, what we're seeing is there are a lot more people going forward, and it creates disequities when it's not equitable across all of our different populations. So as we go forward with that information, let's look at this, our innovation economy. So this is like those careers that were listed at the beginning of this portion of the presentation. The innovation economy, these are high wage, high growth jobs, often in our tech fields. They're fast growing jobs. We see again a huge disparity for our students, where if our total population in San Diego County is here on the left, with 34% of our students, or of not of our students, this is just population in San Diego County being Hispanic, but only 17% of that innovation economy is made of these students. So here we are, and like we have looked at equity data our whole lives in education, great, but we look at test scores, and we look at how many students pass an AP test, and we look at, you know, all of these pieces of data. And if you've been in, like, talked about lead data and lag data, well, our data is the lead data, and this is the lag data. This is the data that comes down the stream when it comes to the point where our students are not getting the jobs in the innovation economy because they haven't, in 7th grade and in middle school and high school, the disparities begin and they continue for the rest of their lives. And so we have this opportunity as educators in the CTE space or in career readiness across everything, right? When I taught medical chemistry, that was not a CTE class. That was a course that focused our students on opportunities in the highest growing field in San Diego County, right? The health and medical has been the highest growing field. And so what we want our students to do is not just find, wow, I want to be a medical doctor or a registered nurse, but the thousands of opportunities in the innovation economy in that space, lab technician, respiratory therapist, thousands of positions, or even coding in the back end or running the labs that tell us what that is. So what we want our students to do is be empowered to be part of this innovation economy, but we have to step back and make sure they're college and career ready, and that we really look at our systems to target every population and to see where we have disparities in our systems, because our disparities become the disparities we see here in our economy. This is our county broken down, and this is the race and ethnic distribution in our county as it compares to employment hubs. So one of the great things actually about education is that we see all of these students. We have an opportunity to say, you know, I worked in, when I was in the classroom, I worked down in Chula Vista at Eastlake High School, very high Hispanic population. It is not an employment hub. And it doesn't even have access. There's very little public transportation, very few opportunities for folks to get into some of these employment hubs where most of those innovation jobs occur. So on one hand, access to those jobs is minimal. It's hard to get there. But for our students, that means they don't see anyone who works in those fields unless we bring them there. So they're not going to see them in their community. They're not going to see their parents and their neighbors and their friends' parents aren't coming home from a tech job necessarily, because those jobs aren't very accessible in some of these communities. So what we can do is we can bridge that gap by ensuring that we have career readiness initiatives, that we work with industry, we bring industry partners in, we bring our students out onto workplace tours, and then we build those skills and abilities that they need to be competitive in those fields. So one of the things that's great is that while we are the County Office of Ed, we don't have all of this data, but we have partners who do. So the San Diego Workforce Partnership is what's called our Workforce Investment Board, and their goal is to bring workforce data to us, and then we try to translate it out like we just did right now. But if you go to this slide in the deck, you'll see in the notes all different great resources that you can access for our local folks. And then also, I think no matter where you are in the state, you should be able to reach out to your Workforce Investment Board or work with the Center of Excellence, which is our community college partners, to access data like this for your area. Here in San Diego, these are what we consider the priority sectors. Advanced manufacturing, that's like a fancy word for engineering oftentimes. So we see our engineering programs feeding into that. Education and human development, energy, construction and utilities, healthcare. Like I said, that's the fastest growing field that we have and continues to grow. And obviously, so many of these are also essential jobs. So no matter what happens, we are in trying to grow these. Public administration, life sciences and biotech, and what we call ICT or information communication technologies. Now, for each one of these, the Workforce Partnership has put together these handy dandy little 1-pagers and 2-pagers. So if you might want to use these to interact, sometimes folks will make posters of them and put them up in the counseling center or up in the offices, use them with students. Take a look at some of these resources because it's a great way. I mean, the data we talked about right now, that's the kind of data that all of us, you know, administrators and teachers and educators can dive into. We want our students to also dive into data. And so some of this is a great way for them to interact with labor market information themselves. All right, so we wanted to set the stage with kind of the end goal being the labor market and some of those inequities that we see there. for our students as they face the future, as we pat them on the back, you graduated, good job, what's next? But let's step back then and take a look at some of the strategies and best practices that we can use for this. And let me just make sure my sound is shared. And we are going to go ahead and start with a quick video.
This afternoon, we're going to draw people doing different jobs. And the first job we're going to draw is a firefighter.
Have a think in your head what a firefighter looks
Oh, we're
like.
doing a firefighter.
What's your firefighter called?
Mine's called Firefighter Gary.
Firefighter Stan. Firefighter Simon.
He's big and strong.
He's got a big helmet on.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
Next, we're going to draw a surgeon.
Have you thought of a name for your surgeon?
Jimbo.
Jim Bob.
He's a brain surgeon.
I think he would wear a stethoscope. He gives you medicine.
That's his ambulance.
OK, next, we're going to draw a fighter pilot.
This is his jet plane.
He rescues people.
He likes to do stunts in the air and stuff.
OK, now, who would like to meet these people for real?
Yeah! They're dressed up.
My name's Tamsin, and I'm a surgeon in the NHS.
My name's Lauren, and I'm a pilot in the Royal Air Force.
My name's Lucy. I'm a firefighter in the London Fire Brigade.
So who wants to know how to do an operation?
Who's putting it on?
I'll try my
Everyone's
stethoscope.
We put this in here. There you go. Now you're a proper fighter pilot.
So into your ears. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
It's really good. It's much better, yeah, it's much better than the kids' one.
Got him.
So for those of you on the call, I just want to take a second to see if anyone has a response from watching the short clip or any kind of comment. You can chat. Al, do you have?
Nothing wrong with wait time.
I know. Well, the thing that impacts me is the moment that they said they're dressed up. Like, it was surprising to them. And their first thought wasn't like, oh, they can also be women. But rather that to be a woman in that field is so unusual that they would prefer, their first thought was that this is not an actual person in that field. And so for me, this outlines not only gender inequality, but any inequality that we see, because when our students don't see models that reflect themselves, it's very hard for them to see themselves in those roles. And so we have to remember that equity initiatives are for all students. We don't just need to cherry pick students out of a class to have a girls in STEM club or something like that. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're normalizing equity, and we have to model that in the classroom and the community. And so, in one conversation I had with a superintendent, and it's like, I can't just have the girls pulled out to talk about STEM, but bringing women in STEM in front of girls, boys, any student who's in the class, non-gendered students, whatever it is, bringing women, bringing folks who do not necessarily fit the cookie cutter image of, of a coder or of a firefighter or whatever it is. It retrains every student's brain in that class to see that person as an expert in that field. So that when someone who gets into that field and looks like everyone else in that field is there, they don't see others as outsiders, and that they may bring in more people of color and more women or more of those who are less likely to be in that field, because they see them as an asset, because they've spent time watching them be models throughout their education. So this is one area where you can do this in any class. This isn't just in CTE or career programming. This can be in a 3rd grade class when you talk about some phenomena that's part of their science class, and you bring in an expert from the community who reflects the population of your classes. This could be in middle school when you have a wheel of different career-based themed courses, and in each one you bring in panels of experts who reflect the population at your school. This is a great way to help our students see themselves in these fields. And it's important to know it starts early. And I know a lot of us are in this call are in the CTE world, but we can't wait until Perkins kicks in, and now maybe in 5th grade we can use some of those funds. We want to make sure that our students have access to this early, because like the video said, early on they start to make these preconceived notions on what it looks like to be in a certain field. All right, so as we expand, what does that mean? What are some of the things that we can do? So this is great because it starts in kindergarten, middle school, high school, wherever you are. Explore careers, be aware of careers, all of these things. So we want to embed career awareness and exploration at all grade levels. And this could be, like I just talked about, diverse role models, authentic learning opportunities as well. Give students opportunities to explore careers of interest. But on the side, while they're doing that, you're building essential skills, you're building technical skills, right? One of the things that we see now, technical skills all the way through, is like the computer science framework. We should be doing little bits of computer science while they learn math and English and social science and science in like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And they start to build these technical skills. And then they see models of folks who are doing that, and they start to see, wow, this is a foundational practice for what it means to be a grown-up and what it means to make money one day in our workforce. And I think the key here too is to really embrace students' backgrounds, strengths, interests, and values. I'll talk a little bit about SEL practice and how that connects with CTE in a little bit, but realistically, career should be something that you're passionate about, something you're excited about. And so we want our students to develop that concept as we go. All right, maybe I think we didn't put Al on that many slides. Do you want to talk a little bit about this continuum?
Sure, I can do that. And so you're doing so well though, and your pace is so kind of endearing that I just want you to just continue on. But here we are as a CTE guy. When I say I'm a CTE guy, I'm a guy that took CTE, middle school, high school, community college, worked in industry, came back, taught CTE, high school CTE administrator, and CTE LEA administrator, and now county office. So I have a thread of CTE from like 1975 forward. And so whenever I see different types of infographics, I kind of go through my experience as a kind of a test to see whether or not it kind of goes through what I think that a good experience in CTE looks like. And so the self-awareness piece and the idea of seeing whether or not you could be in that profession, that career, in that job, in that occupation. And did I see anyone that looked like me in those places? And so definitely, when I think about the 70s, I saw football. I thought I was going to go to Penn State and play football, then in music, and then thought you're going to be on, in a band playing music. And then the irony for me is that when I was in high school, 10th grade, back then it was 10, 11, 12, an instructor walked past me, crossed the street to this new building. And so me and a couple of football players walked in there, and he said, "You guys aren't serious enough to take this class." We're like, "We don't even know what this class is." And we don't know whether we're serious enough or not. He goes, you guys just want to hang out. We were hanging out because we were in between football practice. But he was needling us. And I said, I tell you what, I'm going to take your class. And so I took the class, and it was a machine shop class, and I stayed in it the whole time and ended up going and doing that kind of work out of high school and doing the community college machine technology program. And next thing you know, I'm teaching that in high school. And so even though he was ribbing us, I had no awareness of what that room was. It just looked like a nice, new, clean space with a whole bunch of horsepower, and worked out. So I think it's important that in middle school, there's a very purposeful instructional delivery approach when it comes down to the career development and career exploration. And if you don't happen to have a CTE instructor, that someone on that site, hopefully a counselor, maybe an administrator in training, whatever it happens to be, understands that if no one does it, there's another group of students that is going to go to high school with no sense of the opportunity to be in a pathway that might be in their passion, might be in their strength. And so it's important, especially if we have a lot of leaders here in this meeting, to look at some of the slides that we have in this presentation and pluck a few of them out. And they fit in a standard faculty meeting where you're trying to have that aha moment. You're trying to have that place where transformation can possibly take place on a campus that might still look like a campus in 1970s. It still might look that way. But transformational schools and schools that understand how important it is, if we're going to address that 7th grade number Drew mentioned earlier, for a population that is a large population 10 years from now, that right now, if we don't do anything in the in-demand fields, we're going to have to go outside of San Diego, outside of California, to find the professionals, to find those that can do the particular, maybe it's not a 4-year degree program, maybe it's not in a 2-year, but it's a certification. We're going to have to go somewhere else to find that challenge. And it is the school, post-secondary, whether it's 4-year or 2-year, and definitely K-12, it's obligation to make sure that they're doing a good job preparing students for the world of work, which includes college in many cases, sometimes doesn't, but the world of work, being able to explain that to a staff. Many times, when I think of my administrator days on a high school campus and a middle school campus, we didn't talk about it enough. We did not talk about it enough. And the result of that is conversations with graduates who are 10 years out of school, going through 16, 17 different jobs, trying to land in a place that could have been identified if we'd done some strength inventories and things of that nature in middle and high school. And so the career development continuum, that's what I look at. I don't look at it as measuring, okay, am I offering enough get focused, stay focused, or am I offering journeys, Thrively, or Naviance? And then when I get in high school, am I doing, career development plans, or are many of my students doing job shadowings or mentorships, or to the far right, career preparation? Do I have a large number of students doing internships and things of that nature? You can look at it that way, but then the way that I look at it is just my staff that works with all these kids, because one person can't do it. Does my staff get it? Do they understand that this isn't about English getting a B in 9th grade, English getting a B in 10th grade, English getting an A in your junior year, and never having a sense of how to use those skills in the world of work?
Wait, what do you mean? There's not a job that's called English?
Yeah,
It's really
yeah.
good at English. I love English. I want
Kind
an
of
English
shocking,
job.
isn't it? It's kind of shocking, isn't it? Okay, so next slide. So when I think about that, I think about my staff. I think about, at least in my case, I think it was educational leadership malpractice on my part to not do something more purposeful. I did a great job when it came to A to G and FAFSA and college nights and things of that nature. But when I think about I was at some big schools, 2,000, 3,000 at my last school. And I can think I did not, even though I spent a lot of time going into the CTE classes and with really good relationship with my CTE instructors. If you weren't in those classes, you didn't hear one word about internships. You didn't hear one word about job shadowing. You didn't hear anything about opportunities in STEM. You didn't hear anything about the in-demand work sectors. And that's malpractice. So as we look at our presentation about equity, that's where if it happened in my campuses, and I'm talking about campuses that were not, in some cases, the campuses were not high populations of our equity blueprint, our Latinx, African American, and tribal students. But if I'm on those campuses and I didn't do it, they need a new leader. You need someone that's really willing to take on, this is too serious for this window of time, 2022, moving forward. The consequence of not being very purposeful is 5 years, 7 years from now, not having a workforce of individuals that are ready to do the in-demand, high sector, high wage, high skill jobs that are really the ones that are going to exist in San Diego County. And so when we look at our numbers in 7th grade and we look at the ethnicities, we have to do a better job, especially at those underserved communities, in the underserved communities and at those schools where we have large populations of the students that we at San Diego County office have identified in our equity blueprint, our Latinx, our African American, and our tribal communities. That is a large percentage of the future workforce that, if we don't do a better job of helping them figure out their purpose, understanding how to connect, understanding, how to develop skills, figuring out how much do I need to live, how much does it cost for me to live in my community. Those are very purposeful things that you could very easily still not have a discussion about with your students if the leadership isn't being very purposeful about that kind of expectation. And so if you're a leader in your district, if you're a leader on your campus, if you're just a leader in your department, to take a look at how you can infuse that into your students' experience, it will be of exponential value to your kids. Exponential value to your kids. Next slide. And so just looking at this slide, this is just another one that you just kind of take and you just put it in your slide deck as something that occasionally will fit in many spaces. It'll fit in at a faculty meeting, it'll fit in a counseling meeting, it'll fit in at an articulation committee, it'll fit in at a parent meeting. These are very poignant kind of bullet points that when you talk about career technical education programs and their value, it's not all about just the skill. And so just take a look at this slide, and it has value in supporting some of the things that Jewel and I are talking about today. Next slide. I think I'm handing it off back to you. Oh, well, here you go. For most of you know this right here is kind of the blueprint of understanding the whole Cte ecosystem in California. And so sectors at the top of each bubble, and then pathways are the bullets. And to make sure that those are two key components, because we get calls about this all the time. There's always a confusion about, is it the pathway at the top? Is it the sector? Or a parent calls, well, my daughter wanted to go to an engineering and architecture school. And when we took her there, she thought she was going to be building houses and drawing houses, and they're doing, mechanical stuff and robotics. Well, they didn't understand the path. So we have to understand the path. So those of us that are in the call today, make sure you understand that the sector and the pathways and what that actually means, that they're taught by an instructor that has experience in that particular field. It's a lot of hands-on, and that if you don't have industry partners, this is just Al talking. It's just you have enhanced CTE elected. If you're not engaged with industry partners about what it really looks like to live in the world of work in the pathway underneath the sector that you teach, then you're really an elective. And so you're doing an injustice to kids for them not to understand what it looks like and to be able to hear from, and to maybe even be able to visit the space that they've been spending, if they're a completer, at least 2 years in that particular pathway, and to not have that experience, you got to raise your game. You got to raise your game. And you can contact the county office to see about partners. You obviously can contact your district office if you have a CTE leader in your district. But it's important that when you understand high quality CTE, the 2 core sequence is the minimum. You want to make sure you have the articulation agreements. Some of them may have dual enrollment, but the industry piece is really, for me, the icing on the cake. To know that when you go out to the workspace, you're not surprised after spending 2 years in that core sequence. Next slide. Oh, okay, and I'll hand it back to you.
All right. So as we're talking about all of these things, so we talked about the continuum and some of the things that we can do, the kind of slide on Ikigai or helping students find their purpose, and that's great all the way through. You can start some of that in kindergarten, you can integrate it in middle school. And then we get into CTE, where those are really specific skill building programs at the high school, right? So these programs in the priority sectors, like Al was talking about, they lead to that economic mobility. We know the jobs are going to be there. And in San Diego, we need our students to make a living wage in order for them to really thrive once they graduate. And so what we want to do is that soft handoff of helping them make that informed decision, to know what their options are, and to have the skills and abilities to enter the workforce, enter the degree program, enter the college, whatever the path is that they choose for themselves, that they have the skills to do that and the informed decision to pick that path. When you are recruiting and marketing, an eye for equity is essential. I know a lot of our districts, what we'll also do is, let's say you're going down to the middle school, to encourage students to come up and join your programs. You can really talk to some of the students who are in the program already, who may kind of be sometimes the only girl in the program. Sometimes there's certain students who represent a certain subpopulation, and maybe there are only a couple of them there. If you can bring those students to the middle school, so that the middle school students who reflect them go, oh, I could be in that program. That person looks like me. It can really encourage them to move up into those programs. So that recruitment and marketing with an eye for equity, it can be really helpful along the ways. Also, use your CCI data. We're going to look really briefly at the College and Career Indicator from the California School Dashboard. And this can help you inform program development and make your equity priorities. Ensuring the students develop the skills and have authentic experiences can be one of the most meaningful things. Helping them earn industry recognized certifications or college credit can also give them a head start towards the degree. But at the end of the day, we give them a lot of pressure. What are you going to be when you grow up? Where do you want to go? Right? It can be really stressful. But if we can step back and really talk to them about how they want to impact the world around them and what they want to change in the world, what are the problems you want to solve? Sometimes those are the things that really help them wherever they come from when we think about their context, and that can help them kind of create the choice of where they're going in the future. So really thinking about our students, where they're coming from, and helping open that dialogue so that they can see not just, hey, you should go into coding because it's the highest paying career. Well, a lot of our students, right, we have a lot of healthcare growth. They might have someone impacted by that in their family. You might have somebody who was impacted by homelessness, and maybe they want to go into business because they see opportunities to help people have a path to employment, right? So our students, by drawing on the things that they love and then infusing their education with skills or with project-based learning where they can actually do real world work, now they start to move their way towards a more equitable future because they see themselves in those careers. They see the impact that they can make. Now we get to dive deep into some of the equity data. So the California School Dashboard does show whether or not a student has completed a CTE pathway, which means that data is there. Now, for those of you who spend a lot of time on the dashboard, you know we are not getting a color for the California school dashboard this year under the college and career indicator. However, if you haven't seen this month, this very month of February of 2022, they did put out one of the special reports deeper into the dashboard that gives you your numbers of how many students hit each one of these. And so if you go into your school dashboard and you click on the special extra measures reports, you can actually get the college and career specific indicator report. Looks different than most years. It doesn't have all that fun color coding, but it does list, it'll tell you how many of your students completed a CTE pathway, how many of your students both completed a CTE pathway and were A through G. And it breaks that down into the different populations. So you can start going, first of all, are there any surprises in there? Is there anything that you need, you're surprised that there's not very many completers? Well, it could be a problem of the way that you put the data in. Or you might start saying like, oh, why do I not have very many completers in this population and so many completers in this population? And you can start to use that data to help with your recruitment and marketing, to help you work with your counselors on ensuring that we don't use some of our biases or our kind of natural ways to like, hey, kids, here's a program, you should join it. But they may not know the ins and outs of CTE and the promise of CTE, some of that data that we've shared with you today. And so making sure that everyone's informed about that along the way. And so I do encourage you to leverage the equity data from the college and career indicator. And this month, not everyone realized, because usually that data is released in December, but because of the restructure of how they were sharing the data, it came out just this month. So take a look at your equity data there in the extended measures reports and see if there's an area that you really want to make an impact. Because if that data of your students in your CCI matches our current data for our workforce and some of the disparities that we see there, then we know the system that we have is made to have the results that we see in industry. We have a chance to make change. And so I encourage you, wherever you're at, look at your data and use that as you make change. All right, I'm just, we had a comment in the chat. Funding career development efforts and opportunities are often not budget priorities. Are there best practices to assure a school has career development professional to guide a program? That's great. I know, and on one side, a lot of times, the people who got into the industry to guide our students to the wonderful world of work are our counselors. And what do they have? 500 kids in 3 minutes with each one of them to figure out what class they can take, right? So they end up losing some of that momentum and the dream they had of getting students into those. And one of the great things is there is a really large amount of funding right now that is specific to career technical education. We have K-12 Strong Workforce Program, which is funded through the Chancellor's Office and the community colleges. We have the CTE Incentive Grant, which is funded by the California Department of Education. We have other grants. I know in our program, we just got a pre-apprenticeship grant that we'll use to invest in pre-apprenticeship in our juvenile court program. And so as we look at the many kinds of funding that are available, what you want to do is really identify what you need in your system before those funding windows open. So a lot of times I see a district who's like, hey, I just got this grant. What am I going to do with it? What, like, oh, it's open, and they just start throwing spaghetti at the wall and start thinking about like all the things. And I do this too, right? All the things that could happen. But if you step back and you start now, before the grant windows open, and you start having strategic thoughts about, okay, wouldn't it be great if we had a counselor who had this focus area? Wouldn't it be great if we had access to maybe a platform or something like that? So as you think about what your bigger strategies are, look through this, look at the some of the continuums that are there in the chat, and you can use that to have a strategic plan so that when those funding windows open, you have a chance to apply for the money that you need for that. Al?
And I would say I was on a number of campuses, as I mentioned earlier, and I saw campuses that I was on where there was money and not really much was done, even when provided. And then I was on other campuses where champion teachers who were supported did extraordinary things before the money was brought to them. And so I think it's important to be careful that money is the reason why something is or isn't happening. And because as an administrator, you don't want to suddenly bring the money and then I've seen this happen. Everybody wanted a makerspace. So we built all these makerspaces. And then the champion teacher moved on, the makerspace became a museum. And so I think it's important to make sure that, and this is where I use the term platinum. Platinum programs are the ones that before you did anything, they were on their way. And then you, as a administrator, as a leader, as a partner, department member, were able to make it better, but it was on its way. When you invest in something that's a cold start, you want to know that it has sustainability, because that's one of the biggest ways to, especially on the schools that we're talking about, when we're looking at this with the equity lens. When you have a bad start, if you have a school where kids and teachers are leaving anyway, you want to make sure that you're investing in folks and in programs for people that want to be there. And so when we look at the data, that's one of the ways that we can kind of justify why we would like to bring a coding program to a school, and we want this math instructor, this science instructor, this CTE instructor to teach it, because there's enough points, data points, that say that, you know, this person's a finisher. And this has always been something that it's always easy to, you know, if you want to get something done, you give it to a busy person, right? And so it's very important that with CTE dollars that you want to make sure that the investment is going to pay off, because the person and the program that you're investing in was doing great work before you ever got involved with them. That's always been my view. And sometimes it's hard to find folks for certain sectors like health science and medical technologies, and Jewel worked in that space more on a core side, but it's hard to get someone to come in and want to teach high school kids if they were an RN or practicing medical professional. But when you finally get somebody, you want to make sure that you support them and make their life learning to transition out of that space of work into teaching and nurturing students in that space. You want to make sure that you support them and help them go through the normal tough times that teachers go through just when they're coming out of, you know, teacher college and doing their credential program and finally got their first or second job. CTE teachers need a lot more because they don't get to go through the teacher programs, right? So they need a lot. You are their BITSA program as a site administrator. And so be very helpful when you're working to increase equity, to be able to offer students that historically have not been part of the in-demand sectors and haven't been part of the certain premier programs, using strategies to encourage them to come in and make sure that they're ongoing, because it doesn't always feel like warm water when you're you know, the only kid in the if I'm the only Latino kid at La Jolla High School that's taking the AP Computer Science 1-2. There's many other places I can be, but if I come in here, it's the beginning of trying to do some work that's going to help out this bigger picture Jewel and I have been painting, which is that we have to do this. We don't have a industry that survives the sectors that survive in San Diego County if we are not building this in-demand support for the historically left out of communities. If we don't build this better bridge, we're going to pay the price later anyway.
Agreed. And I think Lynn mentions in the chat also that a lot of times it's not even just about funding, but it's about awareness of programs and opportunities for our students. I think, you know, it can be a struggle too, because a lot of the career funding has strict limitations on how it can be spent, right? It has to be spent in 7 through 12, or perhaps there's some changes that might go down to 5th grade as we look forward with the new Perkins revision. We also know it is mostly to be spent on teachers who have experience in industry. And so sometimes that can feel really limiting. But as someone who was a core teacher, it didn't cost anyone any more for us to run medical chemistry. It was the way I taught it that had to change. And so in some ways, while you can build CTE programs and will build CTE programs, another area that doesn't cost much is to really empower your core teachers to connect to those CTE programs so that all students are getting that career mentality. To give your core teachers opportunities to experience things in industry, to bring them out to industry, that does cost a little bit, but there's been more flexibility with the funding and CTIG to allow for some of those options, bring in some counselors who can help translate some of this into your space and things like that. So we're very hopeful. I think that funding has expanded significantly. Right now, you have tons of funding that's not CTE specific, but you can use to expand students' learning. And many times that could be in the context of career. So we're seeing districts reach out to us who want to do like a middle school summer camp or middle school, actually summer school with career themed opportunities for their middle schoolers, right? So they're trying to figure out, wow, we have maybe some COVID relief funds. We want to run extra programming to help families who have had to really take all of their sick leave for childcare, and let's give them opportunities this summer to send their kids to school. Well, what are we going to do with these middle schoolers all summer in summer school? Why don't we give them some career related opportunities? So really being thoughtful about right now, when you have some extra funding potentially for learning experiences, how do you put those into the context and think about your students and career? Now, I know we're running low on time, which is why the final topic that I put in here was kind of an optional one. So we don't have to dive deeply on this, but I did want to just take it around. And I think with the last few years, we've been a lot more sensitive about, not sensitive, but more thoughtful about our students and where they come from. And social emotional learning has been at the forefront of many of the conversations we have about helping our students feel safe, helping our families feel safe, helping our students feel accepted. And this is one last step, is to really just connect that dot, because SEL is defined as the way that young people and adults acquire and apply knowledge, skills, and attitude to impact their future. And so if you look at many of the things from CASEL, which is really where we get a lot of our SEL information, you'll see they overlap with our standards for career ready practice. If you dive deeper into CASEL and all those categories of social emotional learning, if we take all of these skills and categorize them, we can compare that to the skills that our employers want to see, which are the essential skills. And these were pulled by our San Diego Workforce Partnership from employer posting, that these are the skills our employers want to see. And that aligns so much with the SEL practices that we have in our class. So this is just one more layer as we are thoughtful, as we go back and think about our bigger picture and our system that we are creating for our students. We want them to experience opportunities to explore their career. We want them to know that they are welcome, that they are encouraged, that they can engage, no matter their background, no matter their gender, no matter anything, that they are welcome in all of these careers. And so as we have SEL practices, you can also tie those in, no matter what class it is, to what they want to do one day in the future. What are the skills they're going to need to do to engage and to give back as well. So that's just one last tidbit for you all. And so we want to thank you for joining us here on a Wednesday afternoon for our first go at this talk. So hopefully things were smooth enough and made sense, but we appreciate you being here. We're really excited to make equity a priority of our work, aligned to the equity blueprint of the San Diego County Office of Education in this as we go forward. Al, did
Thank you
wanna
for
have
joining us. Yeah, thank you for joining us, and definitely reach out to San Diego County Office if you have any additional questions, especially as we really, as a county, want to focus on serving our underserved communities and the targeted groups in our equity blueprint, African American, Latinx, and our Native American communities. So have a great day. Look forward to seeing you at our CTE Middle School Symposium.
Thank you.